Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sabbath. This morning we are going to dilate upon the subject, the Executor's eternal will and testament. The Executor's eternal will and testament. By that I mean that every person has salvation paid for. It is your absolute right, salvation, because Yeshua has paid for salvation. That every lost son of Adam has salvation paid for. It is your absolute right, your birthright. But then you ask yourself the question, how might it be that I lose my absolute right? On the one hand, you have an absolute birthright to salvation because Yeshua, through his blood, and the blood paid for it. But on the other hand, you have an apparent uncertainty of losing your absolute certainty. The question this morning that we wish to address through this topic, this sermon, is how do we reconcile our absolute right to eternity to the apparent uncertainty of losing that absolute right? And so we want to look at the Executor's eternal will and his testament. And as we listen to the book of Revelation being read earlier, chapter 5, we experience a world, a kingdom of dimensions that is ineffably, in that we cannot find words to express clearly what Yohanan here is talking about. It is incognizable. It is inconceivable what the prophet is talking about. Think of it this way. Let's assume that you and you alone were given a peep into the heavens. And then you were asked to go back and to convey to an unseen world, a world that is filled with people that have delinquent ears. What would be the method that you would choose to convey the information that you have seen, even as John saw? How would you tell them? How might they believe that you have seen what no other have seen? The truth is, It's the message of the hour. Let's go back to the book of Revelation where we started. Because the book here seems to be a kind of a drama that unfolds in the duration of many scenes, capturing snapshots and photographs of nations, characters, and circumstances which are placed in a collage. With a sense of anticipation, we read and we look at the collage. And therefore, this morning, as we study the book of Revelation, it is a kind of a literary work, the denouement that leads us to the conclusion of Earth's history. We're looking at what is unfolding before our very eyes that leads to the end of time as we know it. We've got to understand that. Yah had decided that he would give man 6,000 years. That's why he made 6 days for man. And he says the seventh day would be the millennium, the 1,000-year Sabbath. And so today, as we come on the seventh day of the week, we are simply rehearsing for the seventh day Sabbath, which is the millennium, 1,000 years long. We've got to understand that we are living in the sixth day. And so John here gets my attention. I hope he gets yours. Revelation chapter 5, or if you want the Hebrew, it's Chizayon chapter 5. Well, even before we look at chapter 5, you've got to understand what's happening in chapter 4. Because there were no chapters in the word before men put them in. And so chapter 4 and 5 is part of the same vision. So let's look at a few verses in chapter 4 first. John says, after this, after which? After what? After he had looked at the 7 assemblies that were on earth in Asia Minor, after all that transpired during that process of time, John said, and I looked and I saw a door open in the heaven. And the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, come up here, and I shall show you what has to take place after this. So John now is transported in time. He has stepped out of time and into a kind of eternity. That's where John is. And immediately I came to be in the spirit and saw a throne set in the heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he who sat there was like a jasper and a ruby stone in appearance, and there was a rainbow around the throne like an emerald in appearance. And around the throne were 24 thrones. And on the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting dressed in white robes, and they had crowns of gold on their heads. And out of the throne came lightnings and thunders and voices and 7 lamps, of fire were burning before the throne, which are the seven spirits of Elohim. His eyes roam, and the seven spirits. These are discernment. He sees everything. And so he doesn't miss at all anything that is taking place on earth, because Isaiah said he sits up on the circle of the earth. John here is taken in view to heaven. So come with me to chapter 5. And John says, I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back. There's writing inside the scroll, but it is sealed on the back. That's what John wants you to know. And I saw a strong messenger proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the scroll and to loosen its seals? And no one in heaven or on the earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look at it. The voice says, who is able to open the scroll? Who is able to unseal this? Because the contents therein, they are alluring. The people at the end time, they need to know it. But John cannot find anyone who is fit to open the scroll. John says there's no one in heaven to do it. Not even the seraphs and cherubim. They can't open it. No one on the earth can open it. And even if you exhume the dead man, John says, none that is under the earth is able to open the scroll. And John says, I start to weep, because John now is somewhat agitated, because in suspense, he wants to know what's in the scroll. He wants to know. Inquiring minds wants to know. But there is none. And he's weeping. I hope you understand where I'm taking this, because that which Johannan here, John, is seeing is the same thing that Daniel saw. He who sits on the throne here that John saw is the same person who sits on the throne in Daniel chapter 7. We'll go there shortly. But then John is told, John says, and I wept much, because no one was found worthy to open and read the scroll or to look at it. Not even to look at it. This is classified information. Are you with me? And one of the elders said to me, do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Yehudah, the root of David, overcame to open the scroll and to loosen its seven seals. Now, we've heard much about the root of Jesse, but never the root of David. And we're dealing with here, John says, who is he? John says that he is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He's a lion and he's a lamb. Now, what John is telling us is that the predator is also the prey. Are you with me? When we draw the analogy from the jungle, the lion is king of the jungle. And he's a predator. And you know the lamb, they're meek and easy to be led astray and be sacrificed. John says it's the Lion of Judah. That's who we saw. And it reminds me that the whole book here brings me to the thought that it is somewhat Shakespearean. Why do I say that? Because we're dealing with a lion, we're dealing with a lamb, we're dealing with a Messiah, we're dealing with an advocate, we're dealing with a savior. He has so many different names. And Shakespeare, I believe, took from the word. I'm not saying he plagiarized in any way, but when he said, all the world is a stage and all the men and women are simply players, they have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. Can you think of anyone who has played a greater part and as many parts as Yeshua Messiah? Can you? And so that's the Shakespearean aspect of it. And so we read that in As You Like It. And so in this Revelation, we have many scenes and many acts. And as I indicated earlier, we're looking at the denouement. The plot thickens as we read Revelation. John says, I see a lion of the tribe of Judah. The root of David overcame and opened the scroll and loosened its seven seals. And I looked and saw in the midst of the throne and of the four living creatures, and in the midst of the elders, a lamb, what? Standing as having been slain, having seven horns and seven eyes, which are the seven spirits of Elohim sent out into all the earth. And he came and took the scroll out of the right hand of him sitting on the throne. And when he took the scroll, the four living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and a golden bowl filled with incense, which are the prayers of the set apart ones, the saints. So John says that there is something in that scroll, the contents of which are important. And so John says, I cried. Now, we're going to look at Daniel now. And when Daniel saw the contents of it, Daniel said he was sick. And so it intrigues me greatly that we're dealing with a scroll that has seven seals. When Daniel saw it, Daniel was sick. Yohanan cried, and we don't even bat an eyelid. That tells you what kind of society, civilization we're living in. So come with me to the book of Daniel, chapter 7. And we will begin at verse 9. And I was looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days was sealed. So he who sits on the throne here in chapter 7 in Daniel, it's the same person who sits on the throne in chapter 4 that John saw. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like clean wool. His throne was flames of fire, its wheels burning fire. A stream of fire was flowing and coming forth from his presence, and 1,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judge was seated, and the books were open. That's what Daniel saw. Daniel says the books were open. And if ever you should read verse 27 of chapter 8 of Daniel, Daniel said, and I, Daniel, was stricken and became sick for days. Then I rose up and went about the sovereign's work, and I was amazed at the vision, but there was no understanding. Hear me. This sealed scroll that we read about in Revelation 5, at the time Yohanan was made aware of it, only Daniel and Yah himself knew what was inside. Are you with me? Daniel knew what was inside, but Daniel said, I don't understand it. Oh, yes. So come with me to Daniel 12, and we will read verse 4. Daniel sees it. And verse 4 says, but you, Daniel, hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall diligently search, and knowledge shall increase. Daniel sees the contents of the word, but Daniel is told to seal it up because it's for the people at the end time. So Daniel knows what's in it, but he doesn't understand it. And so we're told John now sees it. And to understand where we are in time then, John, obviously, as you know, is on the island of Patmos. He's in prison. Emperor Domitian placed him in prison. He is in, perhaps you may call it, the original Alcatraz out there in the Aegean Sea. This is about 95 to 96 AD, near the end of the century, and he gets this vision. So we have an understanding here as to when the end time began, because we're told the book was closed. It's for the people at the end time. Now John sees it, and John has to explain what's in it. So we see that the king is sitting on the throne. And we better go back to Daniel chapter 7 so we can get a better feel and a better hold of what is happening in here. If you come with me to verse 13 of that said chapter, we will look at it. Daniel is speaking, and you watch what I'm doing. I'm juxtaposing these two chapters, these two books, so that you can bring together those contrarieties of thoughts that we might have. And verse 13 says, I was looking in the night visions and saw one like the son of Enosh coming with the cloud of heavens, and he came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. So this is Yeshua. The Lamb you saw in Revelation chapter 5 is the Son of Man here. Let's not miss that. Verse 14, and to him was given rulership and preciousness and the reign, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His rule is an everlasting rule which shall not pass away, and his reign that which shall not be destroyed. Did you get that? Daniel says, I saw the Father sitting on the throne, and thereafter I saw the Son coming, and he came to the Father, and he was giving what? Dominion and power to rule. Of course, now you understand why he spoke to us so kindly in John chapter 14. He said, let not your heart be troubled. I have gone away to do what? To prepare a place for you. And if I go, I will come again and receive you unto myself. So where I am, you too will be there with me. That's what. So we're looking at what precipitates that event of his second coming. We need to understand that, because Malachi chapter 3, come with me there so that we can walk this through and get a better feel, because I indicated earlier that when you read the word, and particular Revelation, you see a kingdom with dimensions that you cannot really comprehend. Malachi 3, and he says, see, I am sending my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. Then suddenly the master you are seeking comes to the Ekel, that's his temple, even the messenger of the covenant in whom you delight. See, he is coming, said Yahweh of hosts. And who is able to bear the day of his coming, and who is able to stand when he appears? For he is like the fire of the refiner, and like the soap of a launderer. And he shall sit as a refiner and a cleaner of silver, and he shall cleanse the sons of Levi and refine them as gold and silver, and they shall belong to Yahweh, bringing near and offering in righteousness. Understand what's going on here. He's coming from somewhere, and he comes to the Father in the most holy place. Malachi wants you to know that there were some people waiting for his coming, believing that he was coming, that was his second coming. But no, he didn't come there. He came to the tabernacle in heaven. That's where he went. He is coming. Remember when Moses was told to make a tabernacle, the tabernacle has two apartments. So Yeshua here is coming from the first apartment. And how do I know that? Because the word tells us that when John looked in heaven, he saw the menorah and he saw the altar of incense and he saw the showbread. All of these, they're in the first apartment. And now he is where the Father is, where the Ark of the Covenant is, and the mercy seat. Remember our topic. We're looking at the will that was made in our stead. We're looking at that. So John, Yohanan, and Malachi says he has left the first apartment and he has gone into the second apartment. Remember, back in Leviticus chapter 16, on the Day of Atonement, the 10th day of the 7th month, that is the 10th day of Tishri, only the high priest could come into the most holy place. And while he was in there, nobody could be in the temple because everybody what were they doing? They were looking after their own soul. They were praying and they were fasting on that day. But I want you to know even more so that the event that we're talking about here represents the marriage of the Lamb. I know what teachers have told you, and they have said, the church is the bride. They have said that, and many have said that. And therefore, is married to the church. Come with me to Revelation chapter 21. Revelation chapter 21. And let us begin at verse 9. And one of the seven messengers who held the seven bowls filled with the seven last plagues came to me and spoke with me, saying, Come, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. Come up, Yohanan, come up. I will show you who the Lamb's wife is. And he carried me away, that's verse 10, in the spirit to a great and high mountain and showed me the great city, the set apart Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from Elohim. Having the esteem of Elohim, and her light was like the most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. So John is saying the city, the new Jerusalem, that city that Abraham looked for, that city that was not made with hands, it's that city that is the Lamb's wife. Then who are we? We're guests. We're guests at the banquet. The wedding takes place in heaven. Daniel shows you that. John shows you that. The wedding takes place. And this is the time that we've just read when he received the kingdom and power and glory. That's the wedding. But there were people waiting for him. And Matthew 25 speaks of that. He says they all fell asleep. And only those who woke up and had oil in their lamps, they had the Ruach, were able to go in with him. They go in by faith. That's how they went in. That's how they went in. We've got to understand that grace is the source, and the blood is the means by which we are saved. And the faith is the method that we maintain that grace in him. So grace is the source, blood is the means, and the faith is the method by which we live as believers. We've got to understand that. And so you have heard it said, and I have heard it said, that there was a particular group of people at this time that was waiting for the Messiah, and rather than coming to the earth, because we're dealing with a 2300-day prophecy that is mentioned in Daniel chapter 8 and verse 14, because Daniel was told unto 2,300 days until then after 2,300 days or 2,300 years, year-day prophecy, according to Ezekiel 4:6, that sanctuary will be cleansed. Will be cleansed. Now, many have struggled to understand what it's meant by the cleansing of the sanctuary. But we know that this cleansing of the sanctuary is taught in Leviticus, that on the 10th day of the 7th month, the high priest would go into the tabernacle and he would have to cleanse the sanctuary before he makes atonement for all of Israel. He would have to do that. But there were some people waiting, some SDAs, believing that he would come at that time. But he didn't come. And you know what intrigues me as I look at that? If Yeshua had come during that time, he would have come in the era of Philadelphia. Are you with me? So there would be no Laodicea. And so the whole thing, you have to say, was a strange kind of scholarship. Because John was given 7 eras of the one assembly. And you hear people say, well, he could have come at that time. No, he could not have come, because his plan is he will come after Laodicea. But they say that it was on the 22nd of October in the autumn 1844 that the sanctuary was cleansed. And I have sought to look at this because they still teach this, that on the 22nd of October in 1844, Yeshua moved from the holy place to the most holy. And so, to aid my own scholarship, I went back and I looked at the calendar of 1844. And I found that the 10th day of the 7th month In 1844, the Day of Atonement was not October the 22nd. It was the 23rd of September. 23rd of September. So we have a problem. Because if the Hebrew calendar is telling us that the 10th day of the 7th month was on the 23rd of September rather than 22nd of October, it means that many people would have missed Yeshua had he come on that day. The 22nd of October on the Hebrew calendar is really the 9th day of Cheshvan. Cheshvan is the 8th month. The 10th day of the 7th month, says Hebrews chapter 23. That's the Day of Atonement. And so we have a problem with that. And so you're about ready now to join me in the book of Hebrews, Hebrew, the book of Hebrews, because remember that we're dealing with the will. Now, most of you know that if someone makes a will in your name, that will doesn't take effect until the person dies. And after the person dies, then you have to go to probate court to probate that will in your name, and that's how you get your inheritance. And so we're looking at the eternal will. So when someone asks, well, what is Yah's will for me? The way to answer that is in the book of Hebrews. Come with me to Hebrews chapter 9. Hebrews chapter 9. Verse 1 says, now the first covenant indeed had regulations of worship and the earthly set apart place. Talking about Moses' tabernacle. For a tent was prepared, the first part of which was the lampstand and the table and the showbread, which is called the set apart place. And after the second veil, the part of the tent, which is called the most holy apart, to which belonged to the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid on all sides with gold, in which were the golden pot that held the manna and the rod of Aaron that budded and the tables of the covenant, and above it the cherubim of esteem were overshadowing the place of atonement, above which we do not now speak in details. Verse 7, but into the second part of the high priest went alone once a year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for what? Sins of ignorance of the people. Understand what's happening here? It means that you should not sin deliberately. And that's what Yohanan in 1 John 1 to 2 is saying, my little children, write I unto you that you sin not. But, here is that conjunction again. He's pleading with us. Let not your sin be premeditated. But just in case you slip into sin, we have an advocate. What's an advocate? An advocate is your defense attorney. Are you with me? That's your lawyer. He said, if you do sin, we have an advocate, a lawyer, who mediates. He's also a mediator. This man, he plays many parts. He's the only mediator between Yah and man. And he mediates that process. So you and I can reach out to a mutual fulfillment of eternal life. We have an advocate. We have a lawyer. But watch how the plot unfolds. Think of it this way. Because that which we're dealing here, we're told by Paul in Romans, the wages of sin is death, meaning we're on death row. That's what Paul wants you and I to know. We're on death row because the wages of sin is death, but the gift of Yah is eternal life. So every lost son or daughter of Adam is on death row. And if they are not washed by the blood of Yeshua and saved by his grace and lived by faith in him, their names will be etched out of the Lamb's Book of Life. Why? Because we've just read that he is our attorney. But if we were to turn to Yohanan 5:22, we are told, the Father judgeth no man, but he leaves all judgment to what? His Son. Did you get it? He says, you have a case in court. You have a case in court. And you're working out with your attorney how to get acquitted. That's what you're doing. And your attorney is telling you that he will protect you by grace, and he has paid the price through his blood, but you must now live by faith. So on the morning you go to court, hear me? That's the 10th day of the 7th month, the Day of Atonement, a day of judgment that comes around once a year on the 10th day of Tishri. That's the day of judgment. You must turn up for court. You can't be talking about judgment. Are you with me? And not understand this. Because we've just read in John and we just read in Daniel that we saw him move from the holy place to the most holy place. And he took the book out of the Father's hand and it was sealed and nobody could open it but him. We saw that. Daniel said, I was sick when I realized that the contents of this book that's going to unfold in sequence on the earth, he said it made me sick. John said, I cried in anticipation because I want to know what's in it. Because remember, the book was closed. You, Daniel, closed the book. It's not for you. It's for the people living now. Close it. So when the book is to be opened, John is standing there waiting, and he's told, what? Take the book and eat it. Eat it up. It's going to be sweet in your mouth, but bitter in your belly. Eat the book. Because the contents of that book must be told to the rest of the people and living in the entire. They must know. Because they must know that this kingdom promised to them is tied up in that book. He has the title deed for the kingdom that Satan stole from our parents, Adam and Eve. He has the title deeds. Satan has been squatting on our piece of real estate. Yes, we don't even want the whole Jerusalem. And New Jerusalem is going to be the headquarters, the capital of that kingdom. John says, I saw it coming down in Revelation chapter 21 and verse 9, the Lamb's wife. So, if that's the Lamb's wife, then we must be guests at the wedding, wouldn't you say? We must be guests at the wedding. And so, in Hebrews chapter 9, let's go to verse 15. And the word says, for if the blood of bulls and of goats and ashes of the heifer, sprinkling the defiled, sets apart for the cleansing of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of the Messiah, who through the everlasting Spirit offered himself unblemished to Elohim, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim. I was reading there from verse 13. And because of this, he is the mediator of a renewed covenant, so that death having taken place for redemption of the transgression under the first covenant, those who are called might receive the promise of everlasting inheritance. Here's your inheritance. For where a covenant is, it is necessary for a death of the covenanted one to be established. Yeshua had to die, because otherwise you could not claim your inheritance. So we have to come to probate court to probate the will of the kingdom in our names. For a covenant over those dead is firm, since it is never valid while the covenanted one is living. If somebody makes a will in your name and the person is still alive, you can't get your inheritance. So the writer of Hebrews here is saying, salvation is paid for everybody on earth. And the question therefore is, how is it that salvation is paid for and more people will die without inheritance than those who will get it? What causes that? We just read that your attorney, the advocate, 1 John 5, is letting you know that your attorney happens to be a judge. Can you imagine you go to court and you're facing a death sentence, and when you get there, your attorney happens to be a judge? You can't lose that case, can you? But we must address the issue as to how a person can lose their salvation even though it's paid for. It's free. We got to address that. Turn with me to Bereshit chapter 25, and we will look at verse 29 on. That's Genesis. Genesis chapter 25, and the word says, and Jacob sought parage. Is that what it says? It says, and Jacob sought pottage. And Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with the same red pottage, for I am faint. I'm hungry. I'm famished. Therefore was his name called Edom. And Jacob said, sell me this day the birthright. And Esau said, behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me? And Jacob said, swear to me this day. And he sware unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Did you get me? I'm trying to address the issue as to why some people who are first birth, they are first in line, but because they have sold their soul out, they have lost their birthright, as Esau did. Many are called, but only few are chosen. How can a man lose his salvation when he sells out like Esau? Let's talk about Prince Ammon. Prince Ammon is the son of David, the firstborn, born in Hebron to Ahinoam of Jezreel. And the word says Absalom killed him. Why? Because he raped his sister, Tamar. How can a man lose his birthright? He lost his because of his behavior. David was the eighth born, the youngest son of Jesse. But he was the one who got everything from Yah. Are you with me? In the Bible, firstborn simply means the first fruit, those who are in Yeshua and live. They're not defiled by other churches, by other women. There's no guile in their mouth. Are you with me? And let's talk about Reuben in chapter 49 of Bereshit. Genesis chapter 49. We're still addressing the issue how we reconcile that, how a man can lose his birthright. It's not just by birth alone. The word says, and Jacob called the sons and said, gather together, so that I declare to you what is to befall you in the last days. Gather together, that you sons of Jacob, and listen to Yishrael, your father. He's calling his firstborn now, Reuben. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my power, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of exaltation and the excellency of power. In my word here, it says boiling like water. In some scriptures, it says unstable like water. You do not excel because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my coach. Remember this story that Reuben took his father's concubine and slept with her. This morning we discussed the sin of adultery, fornication here, for him. Lustfully. And he was etched out of his inheritance, he being the firstborn. Oh, yes. So you pick up that story in Chronicles chapter 5. First Chronicles, come with me there. First Chronicles chapter 5, and the word says, now the sons of Reuben. The sons of whom? Reuben, the very same one that we just read about. Firstborn of Israel. He was indeed the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the sons of Israel, so that the genealogy is not listed according to the birthright. Yet Judah prevailed over his brother, and from him came the ruler. Although the birthright was Joseph, the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, were Enoch, Palu, Ezron, and Carmi. He lost his birthright. So all of us have salvation. It's our birthright. But don't think you can't lose your birthright, as these men did, because they did not live by faith. So men of all ages, whether you're Abraham, Noah, or Adam, you must come to Calvary for your salvation. They look forward to Calvary, we look backwards to Calvary, but all men must come to Calvary for their salvation. So the word says that when Yeshua died, or before he died, through the covenant that he made. Well, let's look at the covenant. Come with me to Luke chapter 22. Luke chapter 22, because the word says, and he said, we're reading from verse 14 now, and we're talking about that evening that many people have developed a doctrine on they call communion. We know that the Bible here is talking about Passover. Verse 14, and when the hour had come, when the hour had what? Come, he sat down with his 12 Talmudim, his emissaries with him. And he said to them, with desire, I have desired to eat the Pesach, the Passover, with you before the suffering. Let me explain that. This is like the evening of the 13th. We know that Passover is the 14th day of the first month. So he's having a meal with them on the 13th. Remember that. Now, you cannot have a Passover meal until the twilight of the 14th. So he wasn't having a Passover meal here. Listen to what he said. He says, and when the hour had come, he sat down, and the 12 emissaries with him, and he said to them with desire, I have desired to eat this Passover with you before my suffering. For I say to you, I shall certainly not eat of it again until it is filled in the reign of Elohim, in the new kingdom. Did you hear that? He says, I'm going to have Passover again with you in the kingdom. The churches teach that Passover is done away with because Yeshua done away with it. He said, no. He says, and taking bread, giving thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And the church has said this is communion. And some have it every week, and some have it every month, some have it every 13 Sabbath. The word says Passover is once yearly. Yearly. If you're not doing it according to what Messiah has taught, then you're really not worshiping him. He sent the disciples out and he says, go now and teach all nations all that I have commanded you, baptizing them how? In the name. What's his name? Yeshua. They baptize in Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's not what he said. He says the name, not titles, and not names. And so whenever you don't do what Yeshua says, you are simply rebelling against him. And therefore you might well etch your name out of the Lamb's book of life. Be careful, because, some have not taught us well. Now, come with me to Luke chapter 12, and we'll read from verse 35. Let your loins be girded. Let your loins be what? Girded. And we're told to gird our loins with truth. And your lamps, what? Burning. Why do you need lamps burning? To keep watch. You can't watch in the darkness because you won't see who has turned up. And listen to him, verse 36, don't miss this. And like men waiting for the master when he shall return from the wedding. I said to you earlier, the wedding took place in heaven. And so we're waiting. We're not at the wedding, but we are going to be at the banquet. Luke wants you to know that. But often you hear the bishop say, oh, we're going to the wedding. That's not what the word says. He says, when we read in Daniel chapter 7, that was where the wedding took place, when he received this kingdom and his power and his glory. So when he comes now, he's going to have a banquet post the wedding, which we as guests have been invited. We've got to understand that. But before the wedding takes place, guess what he does? Come with me to Matthew chapter 22. Matthew chapter 22. Before the wedding takes place, this is what he does, because obviously there has to be a rehearsal. Did you hear me? I said there has to be a rehearsal to see who can attend that wedding and who has the proper attire and the apparel to wear. Matthew 22. The word says, and he responded and spoke to them again in parables and said, the kingdom of heavens is like a man, a sovereign, who made a wedding feast. Did you get that? A wedding feast. This is the banquet after the wedding has taken place, not the wedding itself. It is by faith we join him at the wedding, but physically we're going to be at the banquet table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let's read it again for emphasis. And Yeshua responded and spoke to them again by parables and said, the reign of the heavens is like a man, a sovereign, who made a wedding feast for his son, and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast. Here it is again, wedding feast, but they would not come. Again, he sent out other servants. You get where I'm going, don't you? The firstborn, the homeborn were invited to come, but they were busy. Listen to me. And again, he sent out other servants, saying, say to those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and the fattened cattle are slaughtered, and all is ready. Come to the wedding feast. See the emphasis on feast, wedding feast? But they disregarded it and went their way. Did you see which way they went? Not his way, but their way. This one to his field, and that one to his trade, and the rest having seized his servant, insulted and killed them. Did they not kill all the prophets? Yes, they did. And today we don't kill them physically, but we kill them with word. You're killing me softly with your words. Are you with me? But when the sovereign heard, he was wroth and sent out his soldiers, destroyed those murderers, and set their city on fire. Did you get me? He's coming with fire. Then he said to his servants, the wedding feast indeed is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Therefore, go into the what? Street corners, and as many as you find, invite to the wedding feast. Get the Gentiles in. Bring them in. And I'll make them Hebrews by way of acceptance of Yeshua. Now, what interests me, as you see me post this picture on the front of the program of the Western Wailing Wall. It has been the custom over the years, visitors and people alleging to be Jews would go there and they would shove notes and slips of paper in the cracks, making wishes, and some of which are praying that the Messiah would make his first appearance, because they say the Messiah has not yet come. And the blindness of that is that the very wall, the Wailing Wall, where they mourn, is the remnant of the wall that was around both the first and the second tabernacle, that he told them that not one stone would be left unturned, and still they are putting slips of paper in the cracks of the wall, praying for the Messiah to come for the first time. Then you get the impression that ignorance must be their mother tongue. Are you with me? So the king is doing his rounds, and he wants to know who is coming to this banquet. Come with me to verse 11. We're still in Matthew chapter 22, verse 11. And when the sovereign came in and viewed the guests, did I not tell you that we're guests? The guest. The bride is the city, but we are the guest. And the 10 virgins are representative of the church, the assembly, who are sleeping, but some woke up. Let's go there again for emphasis. 11, verse 11, chapter 22, Matthew. And when the sovereign came in to view the guests, he saw there a man who had not put on the wedding garment. He never, you see, to attend this wedding banquet, you have to wear righteousness. Did you hear me? But he didn't see this man in any righteousness. And he said to him, friend, how did you come in here not having a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the sovereign said to the servants, bind him hand and foot, take him away, and throw him out into the outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few. How many? Few are chosen. The sovereign came in to view the guests, and a man not having the wedding garment. So we see that the executor's will that he has made for everyone, not everyone will inherit their inheritance. Are you with me? Not everyone. Which is sad. And so, why? Why are we not concerned? Why are we not troubled? As the book of Daniel that was sealed is unfolding before our eyes. When Daniel saw the contents of it, Daniel said, I was sick for days. And in anticipation of its denouement, John said, I cried. We won't even talk about it. Because we see things through the eyes of politics. We must see them through the eyes of prophecy. Why is this man not wearing the wedding garment? Come with me to Revelation chapter 18 as we bring this sermon to its denouement. 18, chapter 18. After this, I saw another messenger coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was lightened with his esteem. And he cried with a mighty voice, saying, Babel the Great is fallen. Babylon is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, and a haunt for every unclean and hated bird. Now understand what's going on here. Understand what's happening here. The woman, we're not talking about physical Babylon, we're talking about spiritual Babylon. The woman has become like that. And we're told this woman is the mother of harlots in Revelation chapter 17. But she has daughters. And the daughters, you can tell them, they pattern what the mother is doing. The true woman in Revelation chapter 12 is told, you must keep the 7-day Sabbath. That which was given in Exodus chapter 28 through to 11. But the daughters say, no, we'll take Sunday. The true woman says, you don't celebrate Easter and Christmas. You do Passover, Feast of Weeks, and Tabernacle. Jezebel, the woman, says, these things are done away with. So you don't need bifocal lenses to see who Babylon is. He says the mother, she has a cup filled with abomination, and she is feeding, and they're drinking, how many? All the nations are drinking. Here's the point. All those who are drinking from the woman, they're etching their names out of the Lamb's book of life. They have no inheritance to get. Reuben, you're my firstborn, but you climbed up onto my bed and bring shame into the family. You disgrace the kingdom. Ammon, you're the same. But the scepter shall not depart from Judah. And you saw what happened in chapter 38 of Genesis, that Judah gave his scepter to Tamar. Are you with me? You heard what Judah said, that she was more righteous than me, because she knew that the Messiah must come through that line. So this angel in Revelation 18 comes down with a bright light, lit up the place. You can't miss it. And he cried with a mighty voice, saying, Babel has fallen. Confusion. You have to be confused to do what you're doing. I said it last week. I'll say it again for emphasis. Some of the things that people are doing, they have to be confused to be doing it. Have to. Everywhere you go, people are now saying, Happy New Year. That's what they're saying. Because in their mind, they think the 1st of January is a new year. The word of Yah says every new moon starts the new month. That's what he says. Every new moon. And so they're on the Gregorian calendar, and we have to stay on the Hebrew calendar. We know that the new year doesn't start until April. Yah says to Moses, well, let's read it, because, we don't want they say, we say. But we're just reminding them what the king said. Come with me to Shemot, that Exodus chapter 12, and let's read verse 2. Well, let's read from verse 1 to contextualize the whole thing. And Yahweh spoke unto Moshe and to Aaron in the land of Mitzrayim, saying, This new moon is the beginning of the new moon for you. It is the first new moon of the year for you. This was in what? Habib. Nisan. Nisan is the start of the year. Habib. So Moses, Yah told, the children of Israel, told Moses to tell the children of Israel, this is the new year. And all over the world, people are telling you in a few days' time, it's the new year. And people are going to go to church and have meetings and worship, saying they're bringing in the new year. How, if you were not confused, you wouldn't be doing that. I say that respectfully, but you've got to be confused. And so the angel here is saying, confusion, Babylon is falling. That's what it is, what Babylon means. Because all the nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her whoring, and the sovereigns of the earth have what? Committed whoring with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich through the power of her riotous living. So he's telling you what it is that is causing all of this. Then verse 4, and I heard another voice from the heavens saying, come out from those institutions, come out of her, my people. Did you hear that? He says, some of you belong to me, but you are in somebody else. You have an apartment in Jerusalem, the one I spoke about, a beautiful mansion, but you have a rented house. You're living in a tenement house in Babylon. Come out. You can understand why the troubadour from Trenchtown said, Dreadlocks can't live in a tenement yard. Are you too much so and too much watch? Yeah, come out. Come out into your mansion. Let's close on this, John chapter 14, because it's worthy. You know, I mentioned it before, but because it's Yah's word, it's Beer's replication. Are you with me? John chapter 14, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in Elohim, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many staying places. And if not, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I shall come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, you might be too. And where I go, you know the way you know. Thomas said to him, Master, we do not know where you are going, and how are we able to know the way? Yeshua said to him, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, did you hear that? Many people today are saying that he is not the Messiah. And that man, that carpenter that came 2,000 years ago, he's not the Messiah and he's not the Savior. And he's saying, if you don't come through me, your call upon the Father is pointless. So my question is, why then are you pushing strips into the Wailing Wall and you reject the Messiah? Why? Why are you doing that? And not only that, you're planning to build a temple and to start the sacrificial system again. Did you not read what he said? He said, the blood of bulls and goats, don't cut it. They don't cut it. Only the blood of Yeshua. Only that. So, by his grace, which is a source, his blood is the means by which we're saved, and by faith we live in him. Such is our prayer today in Yeshua's name. Amen.